It's time for Lefties Losing It. And I've said it before and I'll say it again. You do not hate the leftist media enough. You think you do, but you don't. And let me again demonstrate why. After the sickening Minnesota shooting where a trans-identified monster shot multiple children, killing 2 and injuring dozens more, the media were not only eager to downplay the killer's trans identity and what he expressed in his manifesto, the confession about why he committed this horrific act, but they were also very mindful of respecting this child-killing monster's preferred pronouns. Here is Jake Tapper.
Because there's been some confusion about what the shooter's name was.
Yes.
Robin Westman's mother applied to change her child's name in 2019. It was at one point Robert Paul Westman.
Correct.
But since she identifies as a female and wants her name to reflect that identification, was underage, it's now Robin Westman.
No, Jake, it was not a she, never was, never will be. It was a child-killing man. Here is ABC again, referring to this killer as a she and obediently observing this murdering bastard's preferred pronouns.
The minor child, quote, identifies as a female and wants her name to reflect that.
Indeed, the list of TV hosts and media outlets playing this game was lengthy. Here is Andrew McCabe on CNN again, taking a break from lying about Russian collusion to note that the killer's mother is grieving for her daughter.
For the mother to not even return to the state to answer law enforcement questions, to try to provide some assistance. I'm sure she's grieving for her daughter.
And here is PBS, the taxpayer-funded PBS, cutting off a Democrat politician, Amy Klobuchar, who used accurate pronouns to describe this mass shooter. The host then corrected the senator.
Of course, the hate, you're going to find that this perpetrator, that this horrific offender, that
right.
It was all-purpose hate, right? He hated a lot of different groups. It wasn't one ideology or another.
We're going to have to leave it there. That is Senator Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota. Thank you very much for taking the time to speak with us.
Thank you for thinking of us. Thank you.
And just a point of clarification, Senator Klobuchar referenced the shooter as he. Although police have identified a suspect, it's still unclear at this time what that person's gender is or how they identify.
And the media would have you believe that this killer who put together a manifesto expressing his hate for Christians, for Jews, for Donald Trump, indeed, he wanted to kill the president, and yet the media would have you believe that no one knows his motives. They're oblivious to the motives or to the fact that there's been a spate of trans-identified mass shooters. And shame on the politicised Minneapolis police for their cowardice and, of course, the Democrat Minneapolis mayor.
We don't have a motive at this time.
It's unclear what the motive was.
Again, there's just nothing specific in the evidence that's been recovered.
There's no information, nothing specific to identify a specific motive, but they'll be continuing to talk to people to see if there was a flag, if something may have popped up that they can look into.
There's no clear motive, and that's what we want to know. Was this a revenge shooting because there were prior affiliations to the school? Is this notoriety?
The shooter identified, we are told, as female, legally changed their name from Robert to Robin. There's no connection yet from that to the motive.
I don't believe that how the shooter identifies currently in this investigation right now is of significant importance.
The mayor also calling on people to, quote, stop villainizing the trans community after learning that the suspect, who was born male, identified as female.
Spoke about this so profoundly and powerfully.
I have heard about a whole lot of hate that's being directed at our trans community.
Anybody that is going to use this as an opportunity to villainize our trans community.
This is not the time to jump to conclusions about the shooter, right? What his ideological views might have been.
And well done to Tom Elliott for putting together that compilation. And there are some in the media upset that the killer's trans identity was mentioned at all.
Say demonic, and then it's transgender maniac shoots up Catholic school. You know, they could very easily say time and time again, straight white maniac shoots up Catholic school.
There's a lot of misinformation circulating right now. This individual, as far as we know, did identify as transgender. However, as we look at the spectrum of mass casualty events in our nation's history, there have been a range of motivations and a range of profiles that have been associated with mass casualty events. You look at the shooting in Charleston at a historically black church in 2015. That was perpetrated by a white supremacist.
Yeah, let's go back to 2015, or perhaps we can focus on this mass shooting and a number of others like it in recent years.
The Denver shooter was trans, the Aberdeen shooter was trans, the Nashville shooter was trans, the Georgia shooter was trans, the Philadelphia shooter was trans, the Uvalde shooter was trans, the Colorado shooter was trans, and now the Minnesota shooter was trans. I think one of the things that you see being pointed out by the Walsh types is that even if there is no clear ideology, there is something in the water with the untouchable nature of the trans identity until just the past really year that you could even talk about it frankly, and what appears to be a kind of underlying mental instability that tends to disproportionately give rise to these school shootings.
Now, here is a dude identifying as a woman, a compassionate, loving lefty, expressing sadness for the kids that were murdered. But listen to the rest of what he says. This is absolutely putrid and callous, just gross.
I feel terrible for the kids. I feel so bad for not just the victims, but the people who witnessed it and will now have to live with that for the rest of their lives. I don't feel bad for their parents. This happened at a Catholic school. There should have been no children there at all. We know what the church does to kids, so I feel terrible for the kids. May the universe protect them from their Catholic parents.
What a gross individual. Now, one man who has had enough of the media, political and activist classes' lies and gaslighting is Seb Gorka. Let's hear from the White House counter-terrorism czar on CNN, correcting the host's dodgy data and conclusions.
Between 2016 and 2020, 96% were non-trans men. So I know you're focusing on this shooter being trans.
Well, no, because your facts obfuscate two things. You are using data based upon the predominant gun violence, which is gang-on-gang violence with zero ideological content. If you remove all of that, the gang violence on the streets of Chicago, LA, Detroit, then you come down to a much smaller data set. So it's like those who say, you know, gun violence in America causes so many deaths, and then fail to note that the majority of the stats they are using refer to also suicides by gun, which of course is not what we are talking about here today. So let's concentrate on mass shootings at schools, specifically Christian or Catholic schools. Then the data set is wholly different. So don't conflate different data sets just to make a political point. There was an ideological content to this attack. That's what terrorism is. It's not because somebody didn't get the drug deal they wanted. It is an ideological message, whether it was anti-Israel, as in this case, whether it targeted President Trump in its rhetoric, as we saw on one of the magazines written by the perpetrator on that YouTube video, or whether we saw the fact that it was anti-Christian and targeting children. That has nothing to do with gang violence. Let's not mix the two things up.
Joining me now is Sky News contributor Kosha Gator. Kosha, the CNN host there, tried again to argue the case, but even if you accept her dodgy data, trans-identified individuals are overrepresented in these cases.
Yes. So what Seb Gorka was doing there, just to build on that, in the last 2 years, there have been 5 mass shootings at schools, as defined by 2 or more people dying, from Uvalde, Texas, to what we just saw a few days ago. And of those 5, 2 out of the 5 were trans. So that's 40%. That's what we're talking about. And then on top of the stats, the reason why people are really focused on this is because when somebody is trans, the perpetrator, it is a mental health issue. Ultimately, if you have an identity crisis, whatever the root cause is, whether it's genuine dysphoria or some other problem, you're not mentally stable, potentially. And then on top of that, a lot of them have these interventions, chemical, surgical, whatnot. And if that's messing with their mind, that is what the concern is. And then they get their hands on guns, legally or illegally, and the rest is unfortunately bad history. And that's the conversation that the media is trying for us to not have. And I think that's what he and others are really trying to pinpoint.
And the media's reluctance to talk about perhaps the motives behind this, even though the manifesto became public very quickly. Anyone can read through it, and it's quite clear that this individual hates Christians, Jews, Trump. He was expressing how he felt. He was expressing also his own regret about getting caught up in this ideology and transitioning.
Yes, that was actually one of the saddest things, I think, to the extent that one can be charitable even to him, that regret is something we see more and more, and that was even expressed in there. So it's inconvenient with the agenda, which is to protect this group, and they can do no wrong, and any questioning of them, you're vilifying them, and so that's why they're creating this force field around them. But in the day and age of the internet, all this stuff is getting out there, and this issue is generally an 80-20 issue, where people really are on, they call it team sanity, on the side of not coddling this group. You can have sympathy for them, you can help them, but let's not coddle them and pretend that there's no issue there. So CNN is on the wrong side of this debate, and I think they're going to continue to find that out.
And some of the statements from the Minneapolis mayor, they were just absolutely out there. Kosha, former CDC immunisations chief, Dr. Dimitri Daskalakis, has said he only sees harm coming under the direction of Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. after he resigned from the government organisation in protest, citing politicisation of public health under the Trump administration. But this is a man who has politicised his own role. He uses terms like pregnant people instead of women. He declares his pronouns like we don't know he's a man. He's precisely what is wrong with these public institutions which have been hijacked by activists, always activists from the left, and it seems like he can't cope under this administration that doesn't stomach that sort of activism.
He quit in a huff with 2 or 3 other colleagues when his boss, the head of the CDC, was ousted by the Trump administration earlier this week, and they're going out with big statements and proclamations about how vaccine science is being politicized. Basically, that's ostensibly what he's saying. But underneath that, anybody who uses pregnant people is, I think, at the far end of the spectrum of wokeism. So he's out there. He's got all the right credentials, but he, before this, worked for HIV prevention. He was a spokesperson for monkeypox and all of that stuff. So he's kind of a vaccine fanatic, actually, in terms of what he's been pushing around those things. But really, it sounds like more than vaccines, this other broader cultural stuff is part of his agenda. And a lot of people are just saying good riddance for people like him, whether it's him or Rachel Levine, the 4-star admiral who was the assistant health under the previous administration, secretary under the previous administration, and first openly trans person serving in that role, Woman of the Year. They gave that award.
Rachel.
Those people are the best poster child for the other side. Like, the more you put up photos of Bobby Kennedy and Trump and Pete Hegseth on one side of the split screen and then these guys on the other, nothing more needs to be said.
That's a very good point. But this whole notion of vaccine science being politicised, well, what happened during COVID? You could argue that's where vaccines were really undermined, and so many people who had 100% faith in vaccine science are now questioning that, because we did see something that isn't really a vaccine being called a vaccine. We were told it was going to prevent infection. It didn't. We were told it was going to stop people spreading it if you had the vaccine. It didn't do that either.
People lost jobs because of it. There was so much coercion really around it. The two things that have corrupted the medical institution, which I think has been more eye-opening compared to the media or other institutions that we've known have been corrupted for a while, is the way they handled COVID around the world, every establishment, and the other is the trans issue and how they're rushing to affirm rushing into those interventions for young people, for minors especially, instead of looking at other alternatives. They really have had a fall from grace, and it's going to take a long time to build up their credibility.
A lot of people say the moment we had hundreds, I think it could have even been thousands of doctors saying that, oh no, those mass BLM rights, they're fine, that wasn't a public health issue. At the same time that they were saying stay in your homes, don't go to school, don't go to work, but somehow these rallies weren't going to be super spreader events. Now, if you believe the polls, the Trump administration is in a bit of trouble when it comes to its tariff policy, with CNN reporting that opposition to tariffs is up from 48% in 2024 to 60% today. Kosha, would that be troubling the administration, do you think?
I don't think on a deep level. Now, President Trump does enjoy polls and good polling, but on this issue, I think he is really sure of the fundamentals of his belief system around tariffs, that I think he's going to be quite steadfast. It's brought in, Secretary Bessent was saying something like $500 billion in new revenue. It's reindustrializing the heartland and other parts of America, bringing jobs back, recalibrating supply chains, getting vital products manufactured again within the U.S. boundaries, which is a national security benefit, and so much beyond that goes into this, that I just don't see him capitulating on tariffs, even though he is under attack on that issue, like everything else, by the media a lot, which is why probably that's reflected in the polls, as well as the courts. There's a court case right now. Some judge sued him that you can't do that, and all those things are going to make their way up to the Supreme Court, but I think he's going to stay on the path.
You know what, even if these stats are accurate, if these polling numbers are accurate and opposition has gone up from 48 to 60%, obviously most Republicans are in favour of the policy, but this is broadly across all voters. That's not too bad given the relentless negative publicity it has received. And you mentioned the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. He said last week that customs duty revenue from the Trump tariffs will reach around $500 billion a year. That's a significant jump from early estimates of $300 billion annually. That's going to make a difference. I mean, it's a significant amount that's going to come in every year to reduce the debt. And thus far, we haven't really seen that impact on prices and inflation. We were told it was going to cause a global recession. That obviously hasn't happened. So the doomsayers have got it wrong thus far.
For sure. That's a direct revenue benefit on top of all the other second-order benefits that we talked about, the job creation and reindustrialization and all of that on top of that, which leads to growth in the overall economy. So they really are trying to move towards balancing the budget for the first time in half a generation, which would be incredible if that happens. It's a tall order. And inflation so far, at least, has not happened. It's better than what it was under Biden. And that was the big bogeyman that they were pointing to around tariffs. And we'll see. I'm waiting.
We'll see, and we'll see what deal Australia gets. We still haven't had our trade agreement. Incredible that our Prime Minister still hasn't sat down with the President. Now, Muriel Bowser, she's the Democrat mayor of DC. She railed against Donald Trump's intervention in her city to bring down violent crime, but she's now surprisingly trumpeting its success. Listen to this.
For carjackings, the difference between this period, this 20-day period of this federal surge and last year represents a 87% reduction in carjackings in Washington, D.C. We know that when carjackings go down, when the use of gun goes down, when homicide or robbery go down, neighborhoods feel safer and are safer. So this surge has been important to us for that reason.
Yes, less murders do make you feel safer. Very good observation there. Even the DC mayor there, Muriel Bowser, is happy with the impact of this federal intervention. That's quite a surprise, but the stats are spectacular.
Really, they are. Preach. Mayor Bowser, she should go over to Brandon Johnson, the Chicago mayor.
And New York and LA and everywhere else.
They love the murder. They don't want the help. And this is somebody from their team who, whether she knew that she was saying it or just it's so good that it's impossible to ignore, so she had to say it. Great spokesperson again for Team Trump, and maybe those guys are taking note.
It is incredible the lengths they are going to stop this intervention. I mean, why wouldn't you want to have extra help with law enforcement, even if it's a short-term thing? There's no suggestion that they're going to go in there and arrest law-abiding people. It's only criminals who fear them. So, it's incredible. Now, the director of the original Harry Potter movies, Chris Columbus, has said that the original cast is unlikely to reunite for future projects due to J.K. Rowling's pro-women views. In an interview with The Times, he said, "It's never going to happen. It's gotten so complicated with all the political stuff. Everyone in the cast has their own opinion, which is different from her opinion, which makes it impossible." Now, J.K. Rowling has responded to this on X. She wrote, "As another man who once worked with me declares himself saddened by my beliefs on gender and sex, I thought it might be useful to compile a list for handy reference. Which of the following do you imagine makes actors and directors who aren't involved with the HBO reboot of Harry Potter so miserable?" She then goes on to list a number of her beliefs, including that women and girls should have their own public changing rooms and bathrooms, that women should retain female-only rape crisis centres, that women should remain a protected class in law because they have sex-specific needs and issues. She lists a whole bunch of things that I think, 95% of reasonable people agree with kosher, and it really just goes to show you how divorced from reality Hollywood, the entertainment world is, because J.K. Rowling is of the left. She's still of the left, and her views here are very reasonable. She is not about demonising any particular group or attacking them. She just wants to protect women and girls.
She, Martina Navratilova, these were classic feminists that the left loved. But on this issue, somehow the argument changed, and now it went from women to protecting, again, trans or other people, boys wanting to play in girls' sports and all of that. And these two have stayed steadfast, as have others, and they found themselves on the wrong side of Hollywood, which, as you say, I think is going to be a shrinking island. When the whole world run an 80-20, this issue, maybe it's even 90-10 in terms of where people stand. We will get to 99-1, and still Hollywood people will never, ever capitulate on this point or admit that they were wrong. I also think that behind the story, there's good old-fashioned sour grapes going on, because HBO's remaking Harry Potter, basically, as a TV series. She owns the IP fully as a creator, so she's involved, and those guys are not. And maybe there's something there where they want a bigger piece of that pie that has made them very rich and very famous, and maybe that's part of this.
And she made quite a few actors of questionable talent very rich and very famous. They were kids when they started out. As they got older, perhaps, the talent didn't grow with them. It's really is quite incredible that you still see in just about every TV production, every Hollywood production, this trans ideology and political activism embedded in it. No matter how much people are saying we don't want this, box-ticking exercise in every production, they're still doing it. Kosher Gator, thank you so much for your time today.
Always a pleasure.